Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of There's a Will. We are on the 97th day of the war in Ukraine. With me in the studio is the ineffable, the unmentionable, the very mentionable.
Very mentionable. I'm on television.
I already mentioned you. I have to mention you. Nicholas Richardson.
Thank you for inviting me once more.
Still no relation?
Still no relation.
Yeah, okay. Just wanted to check on that.
Yep.
I don't suppose there's anything.
Yeah, I was just wondering, are you going to plug your book this week?
Yeah, I should plug the intro song as well, because I wrote that as well.
Really? Well, I'd be less keen to plug that. But
you'd be less keen to plug that.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed reading your book more than I enjoy listening to your songs.
You don't like my songs? But you were at the opera last night.
I was at the opera last night.
You only like if I sang in Italian.
If you sang in Italian and you had the words by Verdi's librettist, then yes, I would probably like it.
And maybe a large quelque chose sur le balcon.
Well, maybe.
Maybe.
I don't know what that means. But it was, if anybody's thinking of watching it, it's definitely a very good production of La Traviata. Very good, very good.
Well, on to some more serious things.
Of course.
We're promoting my book again.
Yes.
That is, folks, my book. It's called Rome. You can, Confessions of a, what?
Confessions of a Cowboy Capitalist.
Cowboy Capitalist, yeah. Notice how I put cowboy capitalist instead of capitalist cowboy.
Yes.
Could have been.
Could have been.
Yeah, it's all about how you choose the words in the blurb. Anyway, you've read this book, and what would you say about it?
I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it.
But I paid you to say that
No,
before.
you didn't pay me to say it.
Be original. Let's say what you really feel.
It was good. I mean, as an Englishman reading it, obviously a lot of it was sort of slightly American use of English.
Yeah.
But I hadn't realised at the time, because I did meet a couple of times the character on whom that is based in real life.
Correct, yeah.
And I hadn't realised when I met him that he had this very, very interesting and exciting background.
Yeah, it was very interesting.
I mean, he talked about some of his adventures, but not in the detail you go to in the book.
When I first met him, I didn't believe. I mean, I believed, but I didn't really know where the truth stopped and the
They would probably make, actually,
began.
I shouldn't say it, it'll only inflate your ego. It would probably make quite a good film if they could find
I think
the right...
it'd make a better film than a book.
If they could find the right sort of actor to play it. I'm not sure who I would choose to play that.
I think it'd make a better film than a book. Must run it over Netflix. Oh, whoops, they just went bankrupt, or they're on their way. Anyway, Michal Houlehan is on the line. We call it the Horn over here.
We do.
We call it the Horn. He's on the Horn from, hello, from Aspen in Colorado. Great Scott, what a nice place to be from. Michal Houlehan, good to see you. He is, Michal is the founder and CEO of Aspen Aid, which has been, it's a Colorado nonprofit. He has background in cable and TV publishing and restaurant business. And Michal used to have one of the great restaurants in Warsaw.
He did.
It's called Restaurant
99.
That's right, because it was open right on the Millennium.
A very good restaurant.
Yeah.
It no longer exists in that form, unfortunately.
It was the center of social life, wasn't it, Michal?
It was indeed. It was a great adventure and a great business.
Yeah, we had fun going there. Still remember it very well, very well. I think it's a Taiwanese burger joint now. I'm kidding. I don't know what it is, but it's no longer a nice restaurant like it used to be. But Michal, I want to thank you. You've been a friend of the show. Thank you very much. You've been sending the show, copies of it, to various people. And Nick and I really appreciate that, and so do the people here working in the studio who work so hard to produce it with me. So thank you for being a friend of the show. And an old-time Warsaw hand.
Oczywiście.
Which means, I don't know what that means. What does it mean?
Certainly.
What does that mean?
Of course.
Certainly, of course. Okay. I defer to Nicholas on all matters of foreign lingo. But do you wish you were here now, Michal?
Actually, I do. I think Warsaw in the spring is especially nice. But with all that's going on, too, Warsaw has literally become the centerpiece for almost every discussion I have here.
Can you follow on and just give us a story of setting up your foundation and what you've been doing? And take as long as you like just to fill us in.
Sure. When the initial activity became apparent that it was in the States, we were just hearing sort of narrative that there was a buildup. There might be something happening in Ukraine / the region, and then when the actual invasion happened, I was sitting here in Aspen, extremely frustrated because of my years in Poland. I frankly take this personally, as I think we all do. And I was ready to hop on a plane, and instead I started reaching out to friends, both like you, going, I need to do something, what can I do? And I was given feedback that actually, as the time happened, or the time frame was progressing, the best thing I might be able to do is from here in Aspen, which I think most people know. Aspen, Colorado is a small town that literally has global reach. It's a small place but has a huge influence. And they were said, perhaps you could do something which acts as a nimble resource from where you are. The internet's up, the communications, this is an area that you can actually do something immediately. So I did. And I set up Aspen Aid in response to people in country. And these are things we need now. As you know, there was a lot of, you might say, lack of response, especially kind of noted here in the States, the EU, et cetera, on we need things now. We need it now yesterday. And so I said, okay, well, I'm going to see what I can do. And so I set up Aspen Aid as a credible, transparent resource to look at funding for specific material supplies, and to use the contacts I have in Poland to get things there as quickly as possible, and also to vet specific resources that people here should contact or send funding, what have you. And from that, I was at a Ukraine rally here in Aspen. Believe it or not, Aspen had a little rally, which is something I think you'll find across the U.S. It is so divisive here politically, and the Ukraine situation is probably the only unifying thing that's happened in the States, probably in a long time. But it instantly crossed political, et cetera, and there was an instant response. And from that, I met the fire chief with Aspen Fire Department here, and he goes, "You're setting this up. Can you give up?" And I go, "Sure. What do you know?" He goes, "We have been contacted by the Clifton, New Jersey Fire Department, which is in touch with, I think it's called Polish Fire, to get gear to Ukraine." And so that led to, that was the third day. And I said, "When do you need it?" And he goes, "We need to get this gear out by Monday." And I went, I'm not even registered. We don't have an account. And of course I said, yes, I'll do it. And what happened was the fire department here, in conjunction with other fire departments in the U.S., was what I call my first responders initiative. And from that, one of the things in corporate finance I was used to was talking institution to institution. And what we did, we were able to identify almost immediately a company to help with the logistics, the shipping. The gear was provided by the fire departments, which is all basically first responder gear suitable for a hardcore environment like in Ukraine. And that was gathered and shipped the following week. And during that, it became, okay, I can do something. And that was the origin of Aid.
Right. And how much stuff have you sent so far of the and are you branching into other areas?
Yes.
And where has it gone, for example?
It started from, I'm not the Red Cross or anything, but from that, we were able to send on this end approximately 20 full outfits, helmets, boots, protective gear, etc. And then that was brought in with other fire departments, and then a full container was sent to Poland. So it was considerable at that time. Our end was small, probably had a value around $60,000 US, something like that. That was the first round, but what it did was it opened the door. So I call that the first initiative. Now I'm on second initiative, and I have now a series of Marine, Army, and Air Force vets, probably 6 in total, that are in countries. One, a guy, Trey McAllister, if you look it up, is a Marine veteran that served 2 tours, combat tours in the Middle East, and after he retired, he set up an NGO in Ukraine that does orphanages. So he is an incredible, transparent partner in country in Ukraine. And from that, I received requests, which I think Will Richardson, I asked you as well. We've received requests for body armor, helmets, first aid. The current initiative was real interesting, and that is Jaws of Life. And what Jaws of Life are for people that are in that world, it is rescue extraction gear. And they are hydraulic and battery operated. And that is our current initiative, is to try and obtain 10 to 20 of these rescue tools, which are critical in a high intensity environment. The third, which is happening right now, just as I've grown, even though we're small, it's growing, is the Aspen Police Department surprisingly contacted me, and they said they have body armor. So the one thing has led to another, and so the body armor, in terms of immediacy, is happening now. The Jaws of Life, or the rescue extraction tools, we've been in touch with the manufacturer. They actually have a whole series of tools, if we can get the funding, that were from NASCAR. If people know the NASCAR racing circuit, these are available. We're trying to get those funded and sent to Ukraine. The other, which I'm going to mention, is turning out to be the surprise, really important thing, is what we're doing right now. I started using your show, There's a Will, as realistically an information and education resource. And I cannot emphasize enough how I've been sending this self-distributing, basically sending the links to try and get people here more aware of the situation there in a format that they understand. And it has absolutely 100% been developing not just education, but empathy. And from that, you have to understand, which I think you do, but in the U.S., there is a complete capitulation to narrative as far as the media is concerned on topics. The attention spans are very small, and there was, what I started realizing, a fundamental issue on, one, geography. People weren't sure in general. So where are we even talking about? History, number 2. And in fact, you all did I think it was April 22nd show, where you brought up the topic of Kaliningrad. And people here, what's that? Where is that? There was absolutely no awareness that Russia, in fact, has a border with Poland. That resource of having your show and passing that on to different people is where I started receiving the most interesting feedback, going, send me more. And it's really important because when people have their, when the Johnny Depp trial came, suddenly the Ukraine and Russian onslaught was basically just eclipsed on a lot of the news. And suddenly you're going, oh my God, it's really, really important to develop empathy as well as some education. And so through your show and some others, been passing that on. At the same time, if there's a funding request for the things I mentioned, I try and get some awareness onto what the country's all about. It's not just a World War II situation, which a lot of people, that's their only vision of Poland. And it has really changed things as far as I'm concerned. So the education and awareness of what and where the Poland, the Ukraine situation is all about is important.
Yeah, it's a good point you make about raising awareness of what Poland's like today. I mean, in Warsaw itself looks kind of like Atlanta, Georgia, with the skyscrapers downtown and everything. It's a really bursting into the sky. The other thing, but you mentioned Kaliningrad. It's a good point, isn't it? That is an island with a northern border on the Baltic Sea and the southern border.
Yes, and the other thing about Kaliningrad is it is that, but it's also one of the most highly militarized places on the planet.
That's right.
The Russians have used it to garrison with soldiers, obviously. Also, they have some very powerful missiles.
They're the Iskander missiles.
Which could easily reach where we're sitting now in a flash, literally.
Very fast. But it's worth mentioning as well that since Belarusia has been taken over,
and
that's now a Russian border too.
Yes, and there's this thing called the Suwalki Gap, which essentially you have Kaliningrad here, and you have Belarus here, and there's this thin strip of land which links Poland, Lithuania, and the rest of the Baltic.
60 kilometers,
so,
40
of course,
miles.
the concern would be in some major conflict that the Russian and Belarusian forces would close that, so the Baltic states could not be supplied by land easily from Poland if we came to a general war, which hopefully we won't. So that's why military folk regard this as very significant. Yeah. And of course, Kaliningrad was the old Prussian capital of Königsberg in the days of East Prussia and West Prussia. But it is a significant place geographically, and brings, as you say, as Michael said, it brings a Russian border up to the border with Poland.
Michael, thanks for that, Nick. Michael, what would you say generally is people's impression of Poland? Do they understand what kind of country it is? Modern country with better roads than most states in the United States now, almost all of them, and great digital infrastructure, those kind of things. People understand that, or what do they think?
In general, no. Actually, you brought up your fabulous book, Rome, which I am proud to say multiple copies on Amazon. But
is it very kind?
The real person, we did it. Used to do a little psychological test back, 15, 20 years ago, and you'd say, think of Rio de Janeiro, and then you'd say, think of Warsaw. And I've been doing that here. And when you say Rio, they think of it in color. When you say Warsaw, they think of it in black and white. And so that image is omnipresent, frankly. However, the single kind of overriding amazing factor about Poland is Poles. If people thought of them had certain preconceived notions, I can tell you that's gone. It is totally now amazement, respect. The reaction of the Polish people is noted everywhere here. I mean, I don't care where you go. You can go to a little town in Nebraska, you can be in Aspen, you can be in New York, and you will hear consistently, if there's one unifying message that's been in the last 2 months, it's like, my God, how are they doing it? These people have, I think the Polish population's up by 10 or 15% just on absorbing people from Ukraine. And that respect and acknowledgement of strength is everywhere. Since I started my little Aspen Aid, I do that consistently, and I think they don't think in terms of digital and modern infrastructure, et cetera. What they think of is an entirely new respect for the people of Poland doing something that most people here stop and think about and go, would I do that? Would I take these people in my home? And I've heard, and you probably have heard that, there have been people saying, every person in Poland as a collective should get the Nobel Peace Prize. I would endorse that. I think you would too. It's just amazing here how generally people are in awe of what the Polish people have done.
Well, that's very interesting to hear. Thank you for saying that. And it's impressive to hear, the ties between Poland and the United States go back to the Revolutionary War, when the General Kosciuszko and General Pulaski were fighting with under George Washington. Kosciuszko built West Point and was a great builder of fortresses. and as well as a commander of the Polish forces here against the Russians, end of the fighting the partitions at the end of the 18th century. And Pulaski, of course, taught us Americans how to do cavalry. So we owe a lot of debt to that connection, and to the United States owes a debt to those Polish patriots and American patriots who helped us in the Revolution to establish our country. So there is a history, what I'm trying to say, of cooperation between the United States and Poland goes back to the American Revolution, not only, but also a lot in the 20th century to do with John Paul II and solidarity and things like that. So it's good to hear that Poland is on the map and that there are good thoughts being thought about the great things that people here are demonstrably doing, wouldn't you say?
No, I agree. It is remarkable what people have done individually. Yeah. I was talking to a chum of mine who's actually English, not Polish, during the week, who you know, and he was saying that he'd been very busy, because he'd not very busy last week, because he'd taken into his house 2 grandmothers, their 2 daughters, and 3 grandchildren. Wow. And he said they were very happy to be there. He was happy to have them because his wife died last year, as you know. And that's not why he took them, of course. But I mean, that's just one example among people we know.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, people we know who've sort of responded.
Yeah, he's a great fellow.
He's a great.
These little stories, it's the Dunkirk.
But there are tens of thousands of
the large flotilla of small buses and cars and people responding. It's amazing. Okay, we've got to go to break now. Okay. I want you to stay with us for more of Michal Houlehan. And the second half, we're going to start off Michal Houlehan from Aspen, Colorado, and about his fund. It was good hearing about that, and he's a great friend of the show, and we really appreciate that. It's really something. So the other thing is we will start the second half of the show with a report from the war front. And from Michal Trzezniewski, our correspondent over there. So I look forward to that.
I do. Last week's was very dramatic. He was heading towards Donbass.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet. Okay, we'll see you after the break. Never get tired of that jingle, do you?
No.
You like that, don't you?
Oh, I love it.
A liar. I'd like to say we're back in the studio. Before we go to show our the report from Michal Trzezniewski from I think Kyiv, and over to Kharkiv region. I want to acknowledge that we have Michal Houlehan from Aspen, Colorado, who is the founder and CEO of the Colorado nonprofit called Aspen Aid. He's been providing enormous amounts of firefighting uniforms and things like that. Jaws of Life coming up, used to extract people from wreckage, and also working on body armor and things like that, which is absolutely essential. There's never enough of that body armor for these fellows who are out there fighting on the line. And he made a nice point, saying that the perception of Poland in the United States is that Poland has pulled off a great maneuver in rescuing all these people.
Well, yes, I think it's fair to say it's
from Ukraine.
It's the individual citizens in Poland who've done it, rather than this being some sort of government-directed action. This was spontaneous charity.
It's amazing, isn't it?
From the people of Poland. I mean,
it's good to hear it from the outside.
It is good.
The perspective.
It is good to see that this message has got across.
And also, I thought it was a very good point he made, that Ukraine seems to be unifying the USA in a way no other single issue does. Perhaps inflation now. People are starting to agree about inflation. And it might not be a good idea to shoplift.
I think there's a reason for that. I think, in my view, the reason is quite simple. Ukraine is fighting for its survival as a nation. Yeah. And in so doing, it is pulling the nation together in a way which Ukraine was probably not pulled together in the immediate aftermath of essentially the fall of communism in 1989, 1990, and these countries becoming independent. And in so doing, it is actually showing the rest of us how important that is. And this is much more important than silly arguments over removing statues and all these other sorts of things. I mean, this must appear completely strange to a nation that is fighting for its survival, that a nation your nation, the United States, mine, the United Kingdom, we indulge ourselves in these stupid exercises in misreading history and destroying things, destroying symbols of our nation.
Well, they call them rich people's problems, right?
Well,
Something
yes, but they're not even from the artificial political constructs designed to destroy things. And I think people, this is how Ukraine is actually really a lesson for us all and an example.
Yes.
You know, you might actually apply the words of Pitt the Younger during the Napoleonic Wars to Ukraine. You know, we have saved Ukraine by our exertions and we have saved Europe by our example. I mean, essentially, that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a nation coming together, almost against the odds.
What's saying again? Say that again.
Yeah, there was Pitt the Younger at the time of the Napoleonic Wars, and he said, "We have saved ourselves by our exertions, and Europe by our example."
Yes, of course, Lord Chatham, his father, the greatest prime minister of the century.
No, but I mean, but this is, I think, a point worth making. This is what Ukraine is doing, and from us. Yeah, they are, although they say it, people think, oh, well, they would say that, wouldn't they? I think in a very real sense now, given where we are, as Michael was saying, the political divisions in the United States, they are showing us the importance of national unity and how symbols of statehood do matter, because this is what draws people together. And we have too much division in the United States, in the United Kingdom, and division over the most ridiculous things, problems which other parts of the world must think, are you mad? Does it matter where you have a statue, this sort of thing? And this complete nonsense, this identity politics, which is actually ripping people apart. I mean, I always thought sorry, I don't have to take up too much more time, but as an observer, one of the great strengths of the United States was it didn't matter whether you're Irish, Italian, white, black, yellow, whatever color you were. In the public sphere in the United States, you were an American citizen, a US citizen, therefore you were the same as any other US citizen. Whether you'd arrived last week on an aeroplane or you'd arrived 300 years ago as part of the original pilgrims.
Well, some pigs are more equal.
Yeah, well, maybe. But my point was that the strength of the United States was that in the public sphere, everybody was a United States citizen. It didn't matter what your background was. And this is what is being destroyed now. And this is the lesson, I think. One of the lessons from Ukraine is, no, we're all in this together. We are strong when we are all Ukrainians pulling together and fighting this enemy.
Well, it's funny how nationalism and national identity is considered such a bad thing. It's the one thing that holds America together is the nationalist identity, because there's nothing else.
But it's not a bad thing. It's only a bad thing. This is not the point of this program.
Well, if you become Hitler, it's a bad thing.
But it's a bad thing if you use it to. Well, okay, we could then.
Or what's his name in China?
The difference between patriotism and nationalism, for example, if you want. Yeah. But then it's a very, very selective, because in Scotland you have the Scottish National Party, and that's a great thing. Anybody calling themselves an English National Party, that would be a disaster. So people are. It's really the those who would seek to sow division always have a lot to say about nationalism, but always take care themselves to live in a country where they're free to say that. Yeah, they're free to destroy the system because they think deep down, they know deep down they're in a safe place, so they can afford to throw bricks because somebody else will. To mix metaphors, will repair the greenhouse.
We've got to go.
We've got to get to Michal. You've got to go to Michal.
Yeah, we're going to go to Michal. Michael, are you with us? Michael Houlehan?
Yes.
You are with us. Okay, sir. Let's watch this report by our reporter Michal Trzezniewski, who's out there on the line.
Yeah, doing
See
great
what he
work.
has to say. Yeah.
Hello, Will. Hello, everyone. Greetings from Kyiv. The historical issues are going on, and today I think that we can show it on the map. It will be much more better understandable what is going on the ground if we look at the map. So right now we have like two main areas of confrontation around Kharkiv and in the Donbas area. I will start from the Donbas area. Donbas area, it is informal name for two oblasts, Donetsk Oblast and Lugansk Oblast, and we see it is the eastern part of Ukraine. And Russians want to capture the whole area of this oblast. Right now they have like 80% of Lugansk or 85% of Lugansk Oblast, like that. Everything beyond, apart from this stripe, belongs right now to Russians, and they have like 50% of Donetsk Oblast, with Donetsk itself, Volnovaha and Mariupol. They try to go further, they try to go north and capture whole of this Ukrainian oblast. But what is important if we are talking about Battle of Donbas? We have three line of direction of Russian offensive. So the first one is from north to the south through Izium, and from Izium, Russia want to go to Sloviansk and Kramatorsk, and yeah, this is the line of one of the line of direction. Another one is from west to the is from east to the west. They are around Severodonetsk. This is the main hotspot right now. The most important clashes are going on over here right now, and the second line of direction is from Donetsk to the north. But those two line of direction from north and from south are stalled. So now Russians they do not have any gains, any territorial gains. The most important things, the most important battles are around Severodonetsk, and how it looks like around Severodonetsk. Severodonetsk is under the control of Ukrainian. There is no even any Russian soldier in Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, but they are around Severodonetsk. Russians are in Kreminna, in Rubizhne, in Smolyaninovo, going southward. They are as well in Popasna. They captured whole Popasna, and 8th of May, they are as well in Nizhne, which is here. So we can see that Russian they built a line from Popasna, Nizhne, Smolyaninovo, Rubizhne, Kreminna. They created a line of controlled small towns around Severodonetsk, and from these towns they try to go further. They try to reach Severodonetsk. Right now they try to go from Popasna to the north. They are attacking Komyszowacha. They are shelling Zolote, Górskie, Toszkiwkę, and so on. In Zolote, Górskie, Toszkiwkę, Komyszowacha, they are still Ukrainians. But what is important if we are talking about this battle? Over here we have Donetsk-Siewierski. This is very important river, and this river is also a natural barrier, natural obstacles for Russian troops. They cannot break through, they cannot cross this river, and they tried really hard in the last week. We have here the Bilohorivka, close to Severodonetsk, on Ukrainian, let's say, side of Donetsk, on Ukrainian controlled side of Siewierski Donetsk River, and the Russian, they tried 2 or 3 times create a pontoon bridge through Donetsk Siewierski, and this pontoon bridge 2 or 3 times were destroyed. I mean, these 2 or 3 pontoon bridges built by Russians were destroyed, and a lot of Russians were killed. Like during this operation of building pontoon bridges, like few hundred of Russian troops were killed just in this week, and also about 100 Russian vehicles like tanks and so on were destroyed during this operation, during operation of crossing the Donetsk River to the Bilohorivka side. It was a few days ago. Very hard fightings were over here, and Russian lost these fightings, and a lot of Russian were killed. They tried to go to Severodonetsk from this side, but they couldn't do so. We will see what. But it also shows us that Russians are very, very determined to reach Severodonetsk. Let's go to the north, because another big battle is going on around the Kharkov, and we have here a big Ukrainian counter-offensive. So a few days ago, 1 week or 2 weeks ago, Russians were over here. They controlled this area around Kharkov, in the north of Kharkov and in the east of Kharkov. A week ago, all of this terrain was occupied by Russian, but Ukrainians did a successful counter-offensive, and firstly And firstly, Ukrainians captured Stary Saltiv. They went to the north. They captured as well cities like Ternova, like Bayrak, like Rubizhne, like Petrivka. All of this terrain right now is Ukrainian because of this successful counteroffensive. Ukrainians are also in Ruśki Tyszki, Czerkaśki Tyszki, Borszczowa, Slobożańskie Ukrainians. They recaptured these villages in this line north from Severodonetsk in a few last days. They also recaptured Potomnik, and in this area we have Ukraine. A few days ago we have Russians over here, so right now we can see that Ukrainian counteroffensive was very successful, and right now Kharkov is out of artillery reach, Russian artillery reach, which is a very big success for Ukrainians. And before, like a few weeks ago, we were talking about victory around Kyiv, about first won battle by Ukrainians, the Battle of Kyiv. Right now we can say that Ukrainians won the Battle of Kharkov. We will see what will be in Donbass. Thank you very much. We'll take care. Greetings from Kyiv. We are going to Kharkov today.
Wow.
Great stuff.
Wow. That was really comprehensive. He's doing a great job.
An excellent job.
I'm really becoming an admirer of his work. I'll tell you, because I know what it's like to be out there in those situations. And he's showing a lot of pluck,
it's worth pointing out that in this war it's become quite clear, or is becoming clear, that Russians are also targeting journalists, particularly. I mean,
I've heard that.
Yeah. There was a few weeks ago, you've seen that dramatic footage of a Sky News from the UK Sky News team coming under fire.
Artillery fire.
Yeah, well, actually, it was sniper fire. Probably.
Was it sniper fire?
But it was quite clear that they were targeted because they were the press, and it was quite clear the Russians doing the shooting knew exactly who and what they were. And they escaped.
I saw one that was artillery as well.
Yeah,
so they are being targeted.
He's being doubly brave, of course.
Yeah, of course, we heard that the other night when we had the meeting at the charity concert.
Exactly.
People were talking about that.
Yeah, so that's worth pointing out. It's not just a case of...
Michael, let's go to Michael. Michal Houlehan, what do you take away from that? Was it instructive to you, sitting in Aspen, Colorado?
Yeah, it's instructive. In fact, that's why your show's important, and I'm actually getting people saying, send me more, is because we get these little snippet sound bites, and the narrative wants to go on the media here, versus your show is actually showing people real time, understandable, without some spin on it. I think it's fantastic, to be honest. I can't believe how many people I've run into here. This is, very cultural, likes to be known as intellectual town. But the reality is how many people have started studying history and just the locations he brought up. People watch this and then they end up going to a map and learning, reading, etc. So yeah, I think it's fantastic.
Well, thanks for that. I'm glad it's useful, and because it's always important to know how other people see you and what you're doing, especially further afield, and particularly in the United States. Severodonetsk is where he was last week, and this is a very hot spot.
It is a hot spot because
I was talking
essentially,
to Raphael, our producer, about it last week. He said, "Wow, that's a hot spot."
Because the Ukrainians are essentially dug in.
Yeah,
they're defending against Russian forces, and that's why this Russian attack across the river would have been so significant. Of course, it was defeated for two reasons. One, the Russians are just badly organized, and they're repeating exactly the same mistakes they make because, as we discussed in a previous program, there's no concept within the Russian army of the man on the spot or woman on the spot making a decision. It's orders from above, and they're followed blindly, even if they lead you down a blind cul-de-sac. Whereas, of course,
in 100 and 200 years.
The NATO approach, which, of course, obviously, to the extent there's been a lot of training over the years since 2014 of Ukrainian forces, is more to allow men on the ground to take the initiative. The Ukrainians have been very effective in this sort of not guerrilla warfare, but individual small units armed with shoulder-held anti-tank missiles, some anti-aircraft missiles as well, and they've been very effective at identifying large concentrations of Russian forces, going in, sort of demolishing them, then sort of disappearing into the ether almost. It's probably worth pointing out, because it's actually quite interesting, that Ukrainians are benefiting from some new technology which they have developed. Essentially, by and large, if from finding a group of enemy soldiers or enemy formations and attacking them, giving the order to attack with your own weapons, artillery or missiles, takes about 20 minutes. Working with some UK mapping specialists and with Ukrainian, their own developers, they've developed a system which, with their reconnaissance in real time from drones and so on and so forth, they can use this, and so they have cut down the time from identifying where Russian forces are to being able to fire on them from 20 minutes to about 1 minute. This was used to great effect at the battle we've just been talking about, or the action we've just been talking about.
The one where they're building the pontoon bridges.
Yeah, that was larger. That was the use of this new technology,
Yeah.
and it sounds a bit. And there was a very good story for anybody who has access to today's Times newspaper. It explains it, but essentially it means that they now know exactly where Russian forces are. And they have developed this computer application. So you can identify where the Russians are. You can then at the same time identify where your nearest artillery units are. And you can give the order to attack. And you can do all that within about 1 minute. Whereas in conventional practice, for those who are well equipped, it's about 20 minutes. So that is giving the Ukrainians a certain speed advantage now.
Well, it's a big advantage because they don't have time, especially if they're grouped en masse instead of properly spread out, which they never appear to do. They must have the worst training ever.
So this is an example of
catch them quick.
And it's rather depressing that in the history of humankind that we always seem to have technological advances during war. But this is a new system which they've sort of
your cell phone is a product of, preparation
exactly.
for war.
Exactly. So that's actually very good. So this again is giving the Ukrainians the slight edge in terms of adaptability and able to respond quickly on the battlefield.
He was saying the casualties in the area of 1,000 or several hundred to 1,000 men.
1,000. The military, the
50
analysts.
vehicles?
Yeah, well, it was essentially a whole battalion was wiped out.
It's a battalion, right?
Yeah, so that's somewhere between 600 and 1,000 troops, either killed or rendered not useful.
It's been confirmed from various sources.
Yes, plus their vehicles and all the bits and pieces that go with it.
Yeah.
So the Russians are rapidly running out. Although Russia has a huge population, and the people running Russia seem not to care how many of their own citizens they send to their death. So, short of some revolution in Russia, which they never seem to have had, this could continue for a long, long time. But that's a slightly different issue.
Well, I mean, I heard the Ukrainian ambassador was saying to me the other night at the concert that he thinks it's going to go on for a while. Yeah. But this was our conclusion from the beginning: was this is going to be a long slog.
The head of
the
head of the Ukrainian general staff has said that he thinks, this is reported in the press, whether it's true or not, I know not, that he reckons that by August the Ukrainian army will have the upper hand over the Russian army, and that this could all be over by Christmas. Of course, it all been over by Christmas. We've heard before.
We've heard many times.
And it depends which Christmas.
World War I, World War II, Korean War.
That's an important thing. The morale of the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian forces is very high. Yeah. And you contrast that with the May the 9th victory parade in Moscow, which I saw some snippets of on the television earlier this week, well, on May the 9th, in fact, which seemed a very subdued event by the standards of the victory parades in Moscow.
How about this? Let's have a word on this. We're running down to time now, but I want to say that Erdogan, the president of Turkey, the self-elected president of Turkey, has come out and said that he does not support the NATO admission of Finland and Sweden. And I was curious why. Saw the headline. Why? Because they harbor terrorist groups of indeterminate origin. You didn't specify why. Aren't you getting tired of this labeling? Everybody's a terrorist. Everybody's a fascist.
Yes.
And there's no reality to it. No. What is wrong with people? Orwell was way off. He wasn't strong enough about the way this stuff would be used.
Well, it's become these labels. People are not capable of engaging with you in any sort of rational debate. They don't know enough to have a rational debate with you. So they just throw a label at you to frighten you.
Well, certainly Erdogan knows enough. I mean,
yeah, well, he does.
But why is he saying suddenly out of the blue that Finland and Sweden, the least likely candidates, harbor terrorist groups? Is that because they've had with the Muslim populations there have had trouble, or
Probably.
Well, why doesn't he say that?
Well, because the people don't like to say what they mean because they are very frightened that it has.
Well, you
the wrong
can't just
effect.
say terrorist.
Well, I realise you and I can't, but
Yeah.
of course these folk don't think. Because this then is how everything is much more complicated than it looks. Because of course you then have to look at the Kurdish issue, Turkey's view on that, what's happening in the Kurdish area, what's happening in Iraq and Syria, who's helping whom in that, and what I say here affects really what might happen there, and you never quite know what people's interests are. It's very complicated.
Yeah.
It's we're dealing with not Russia versus Ukraine, but which is at its simplest, but it's this whole jigsaw of who has what interests of a longer term interests.
We're running out. We've got a couple of minutes left. Thank you for that,
No, my pleasure.
comment. We could go on and on about this.
It's a very interesting
endless.
topic.
It's a very good subject and confusing too. But I want to go back to Mr. Houlehan, Michal Houlehan, and Aspen. Say, we got just to round off the show now. Would you like to leave us with any particular message?
Yeah, I have a favorite actor in Poland, Paweł Dulong. He wrote something that I thought was great and repeated a lot here about a month ago.
Got 1 minute. Yeah.
He said, our grandparents were a generation of wolves, and we find ourselves a generation needing therapy puppies.
Did he say that?
What's that?
He said that?
Paweł Dulong.
Yeah, Pavel said that. That's funny. Yeah, okay.
But I think it just was a really apropos comment because people are changing because of this situation.
All right, it's making, they always say war, there's not only war, but there's nothing like knowing you're going to hang in the morning to concentrate the mind. That was Samuel Johnson, and we'll leave it with that. I want to thank Michal Houlehan, CEO and founder of the estimable charity organization Aspen, what's it called? Aspen
Aid.
Aspen Aid, who's been sending a lot of equipment to Ukraine. Thank you very much for your support of the show, Michal Houlehan. We look forward to seeing you back on the show, and we look forward to seeing you in Warsaw soon.
Absolutely.
Okay? And we'll come out to Aspen, and you'll show us how not to fall down skiing, okay? Because I know you're a great skier. Okay. Right. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Once again, thanks to Michal Houlehan from Aspen, Colorado. Thank you, of course, to Nicholas Richardson, no relation, as usual. Thank you, and have a great week.